Hi, it's Chris Moore with Senior Remodeling Experts. Welcome to Aging in Place is a Team Sport. It's a video series where we talk to different providers. We explore how families, professionals, and communities can come together to help older adults live safely, comfortably, and independently at home. I'm here to guide you, connect you with the right resources, and help make the rest of your life the best of your life. Welcome back to Aging in Place is a Team Sport. I'm Chris Moore, and I have the pleasure to have with me today Tiffany Smith. Tiffany is an RN, and she spent time in the healthcare system, and suffice it to say that she came out with a different opinion than when she went in. So, Tiffany, welcome to the podcast. Fill us in on your background and how you arrived at where you are today.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so my journey as a nurse has been over more than 15 years. I graduated from school in 2010, and I went into medicine and being a nurse very happily and excitedly. And I wanted, my feet to hit the ground running. I wanted to help save people and fix people and heal people. It is definitely my dharma to be a healer and to walk people through difficult times. And it always has been since I was little. And so I went in with my heart full and my brain full of information, and I wanted to make a difference. And I feel like probably my first 5 years or so I felt every day that I was making a difference. I was happy to go to work. I loved my jobs. I mean, there's always bad parts, but there were more good parts than bad. And then as the years went on and I got older and my eyes were opened to the real truth of a lot of what our healthcare system is, it was extremely disappointing. The pandemic really opened my eyes. I was around 35 years old when the pandemic happened. And so I was just older enough and mature enough and had been a nurse for already 10 years to then see all of the craziness that went down within the pandemic. Totally opened my eyes to the difference of the healthcare system than what I thought it was. I was truly a champion for all things CDC and NIH and American healthcare. And, I followed all their guidelines and thought that they just absolutely knew everything that there was to know about healthcare, infection control, and all the things. And during the pandemic, my own critical thinking skills were the opposite of what I was seeing, and my thinking of what was going on was the opposite of what the CDC was saying and other in places, not just the CDC. And that really confused me. Like the 6-foot distancing, the masks everywhere that weren't even masks, so those types of things really opened my eyes. And I was like, what else are they not telling the truth about? What else is going on here? And then I started really paying attention to the profit over people. And I was really upset by it. And then I started really looking at things like, we discharge people from the hospital and they have no idea what is even going on. They don't know where to go. They barely know who to call. They hardly know their own diagnoses. We as nurses don't have time to teach them. We're too busy. We have too many patients to be able to truly take care of people. And so it all just cascaded downhill for me from right around 2020, 2021.
So, what did you do about this new understanding that you had come to?
Well, my practice changed and I became severely burnt out very rapidly. I think I was like, you've been in any profession for 10 years and you start being like, okay, I might need a change up or something. But I was done. And so I knew that I had to do something about this. I'm not one to keep my mouth shut. So I wrote a book. I started it in 2021, and it's called Broken and Brave: The Fight to Heal American Healthcare. And my first version of the book was basically like diarrhea of the mouth, like a really angry journal entry is essentially what it was. My mom read my first version and she was like, okay, you're going to need to calm down a little bit here. Over the years, it took me 4 years to revise and finish writing it. But that was very cathartic for me. And I really needed to do that. That helped get my anger off my chest. And the book is a little bit depressing because healthcare is depressing. Like, I don't know what to tell anybody about that, but I talk about the insurance companies. I talk about the big pharma. I talk about what I saw as a nurse over the years and how disappointed I am in the system. So that really helped me personally. And I hope that it helps others too. I really do. I hope that people, especially healthcare workers, but really anyone, can read that and feel seen and heard, because I think basically everyone is affected by healthcare in some way, whether you're a caregiver or you're a patient or you're a healthcare worker or you're kind of a combination of all three of those. I think it's important that the general public know what's going on behind closed doors in medicine. And I think there's a lot of kind of glancing over the truth and maybe not outright lies, but pretty close. And I know there are outright lies too. So, yeah, that was my first step. And then my second step was to get out of the hospital. I had to get out of there. I couldn't watch the suffering anymore. It was really bad for my soul. I feel like I was watching people be kept alive just to make money, and it was disgusting me. And so I got out of there. I work in hospice now, which is way better for my soul. And then I also started my own business. And so I started Broken and Brave Health, and I help caregivers navigate the healthcare system. So, yeah. So, because like I said, there's just not enough information out there. And if you're not a healthcare practitioner and you're a caregiver, it's very tough to know what is even going on, know what medications, know what appointments are important. And us as healthcare providers, we give you this care plan of what you should do and when you should do it. But most of the caregivers have kids, have full-time jobs. How are they supposed to manage all of that? So my business helps caregivers do that.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I guess my first real questioning of the healthcare system, and we call it that, right? But if you look at what it actually does, it's more like a sick care system,
That is what I
because
call it.
the word healthcare indicates that it would be working to help you stay healthy, and it would be helping you to establish the routines and the habits and the lifestyles and the nutrition and the exercise and the sleep patterns that would all help you to be healthy. But for the most part, it has no interest whatsoever in that. It's only interested in, after you get sick, then we'll treat the symptoms of your illness. But my first encounter was when I was a caregiver for my dad, and I started taking my dad to his doctor's appointments. And he had a primary care physician. He had a cardiologist. He had a pulmonologist. He had, I think, a couple of other specialists. And without really thinking about it, my assumption was that the primary care physician was kind of the quarterback and would, keep in touch with all the specialists and have a game plan for a treatment plan for caring for my father. And I found out that that wasn't the case at all. And my father, who had been, going to his appointments by himself, and I had no idea that it was his responsibility to keep up with and coordinate what all these different doctors were suggesting for different parts of his body, and treating, the heart and the lungs and, all these different things as separate entities. And when I realized that, it was like, what? That's that's insane. Because, our body is a system. It's a totality. And one thing affects everything else. You can't just treat the heart in isolation and the lungs in isolation. And it just, and then when my late wife Barbara came down with stage 4 lung cancer, and I immediately delved into, a lot of reading and research, and a lot of the things that I read that seemed to be helpful and seemed to be potentially a treatment option worth at least putting on the table and considering, they were just shot down. I mean,
Yep.
because it was not in the protocol, which, like you said, is driven by the pharmaceutical company. It's driven by, how much profit can we make off of chemotherapy and radiation when we're talking about cancer.
Yep.
And that just, like you said, it makes you angry.
Hmm.
It makes you angry when you have been led to believe all your life that the American healthcare is the greatest in the world. It's the most advanced and it's the most, it's the very best care you can get. And then I found out that we here in the United States are number 48 in the world in lifespan
Yep.
and number 72 in the world in health span. But we spend more dollars on healthcare per capita by far than anybody else anywhere in the world.
Yeah, by like 4
And
times. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So we should be we should be number one, right? I mean, if we've got the best care and we're spending the most, I mean, we should be living, 20% longer than anybody in the world.
You would think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the way that you described that about feeling like the primary care physician is the quarterback is exactly how every person who enters the healthcare system feels. They think that their primary care physician is going to guide them through fixing whatever problem that they have. That is absolutely 100 million% wrong. You have to guide yourself through. And that's a problem because our healthcare system in America is extremely complicated. There is a lot going on. It's hard to keep track of everything. You have to know like medical jargon. You have to understand the, ins and outs of the system and why they do certain things. Insurance requires you to get certain tests before the actual test that you need. So we're spending thousands of dollars on a CT scan when you really need an MRI. Why? Why are we doing that? And there's literally no reason. Like if you try to find out why, there is no reason and they don't care. They're like, because we said so. And that
Yeah.
is crazy town. And so when you have somebody who's medically frail, like say your dad or your wife, and you are the caregiver who's caring for someone who's sick, like they're not feeling well. So their brains aren't going to work the same way that they always used to. They're going to be more exhausted. They're definitely going to have less ability to keep track of things. And so you have to step into that. So then you become their quarterback. But then,
Mhm.
like you said, if you go to your doctor and say, listen, I heard that high dose vitamin C might be able to help blah, 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 or whatever it is, they will always tell you no. They will always tell you, well, there aren't studies. And then if you say, show me the studies on your oncology program. Show me the studies on your chemo, on your radiation. Tell me the percents of how successful this is, how unsuccessful this is, how sick people get, how much it basically ruins their life. And they don't have those either most of the time. Like they might be able to say, well, in 60% of the cases, we show that the cancer gets smaller. Okay, for how long? For how long does the cancer stay smaller? And how much does that ruin their life by taking these drugs? Because these drugs are poison, especially cancer drugs, but a lot of the other ones are too. And they just don't tell you this. Let me give you a good example that'll make your blood boil. So, you heard of the drug remdesivir to treat COVID, right? Okay. So remdesivir is basically a kidney killer. That's essentially what it is. So I worked in the ICU shortly after COVID. So I started in the ICU in 2022. And I worked in there as a wound care provider during the heat of the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, but I wasn't their primary nurse. So when I became primary nurse in 2022, and I saw people come in with COVID and they were like, all right, COVID protocol is to put them on remdesivir. And after like 6 months of working in there, I was like, every time someone goes on, almost every time, not every single time, someone goes on remdesivir, they go into acute kidney failure. Most of them need some type of dialysis or they just die. And so I started asking because we had a pharmacist on our ICU who sat in a chair like an actual human being. So I went to them. I went to multiple ones on different shifts. And I was like, hey, how do you feel about remdesivir? I feel like I'm watching this kid kill kidneys like within 24 to 48 hours of starting it. And they were like, oh, yeah, we know it's killing people. And I'm like, okay, why are we giving it to people? Well, because that's what the CDC says, and we have to when someone's positive for COVID. And I was like, there's other options. Why are we doing this? And they were like, we just literally have no choice. All the pharmacists in the hospital have asked to have it removed from the protocol, and they refuse, saying that the CDC requires it. Now, why does the CDC require it? Because they had a multi-billion-dollar contract with the manufacturer of remdesivir. That's why. So we're literally watching people either die or become incredibly chronically ill for the rest of their lives to quote unquote treat COVID, so that now they're definitely a patient for life. And that's the type of stuff I can't keep watching that. I literally can't. And then I would go to ICU doctors, like fellows and attending, like high level doctors in the ICU, and say the same thing, like, hey, seems like remdesivir probably caused this. And they'd be like, probably. What do you mean, problem? Why are you still prescribing this? You don't have like a moral and ethical compass that is guiding you away from this? And the moment I would speak up about this, I was shut down and basically told to shut up. That it was what the CDC said and they had no choice. And I think that's a coward's way to look at it. So I'm
Not only that, but it is in direct violation of the Hippocratic Oath, which,
literally.
as far as I know, every doctor is supposed to take, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They all do. They have to. Yeah. But they see the thing is that when you talk to people that are in the healthcare system and I start having conversations like this, almost all of them know, like in their soul and their critical thinking skills, they know, they're smart. They're in medicine. Like they put two and two together, but then they are told by their superiors to sit down and shut up and do what they're told. And that's my issue. And then you could see clearly during COVID, these doctors and nurse practitioners and nurses that were coming forward and saying something and being like, hey, we could easily treat this with another drug that is much cheaper and readily available. We have 400 million pills of it. And they were literally canceled. Some of them had their medical licenses revoked. Like, that is crazy. And that's when my eyes were like way opened with what was going on, because those doctors should have been listened to. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, there was an organization, I forget what they were called, but they were doctors who were speaking out. I can't remember the name, but yeah, they were, a lot of them, like you said, were ostracized or lost their license, or because they had the temerity to stand up and say, this is wrong. And yeah, I've heard some alternate pronunciations for the word pandemic, scamdemic, propagandademic. It's
Yeah. I mean,
it, it, it-
it's hard because I did watch people die from COVID and the treatments of COVID, right? So I know that COVID was real, and I will never be one of those that tinfoil hat to say that COVID was fake, because I literally watched people die
right,
either from
right.
the disease or from side effects of the drugs, whichever it is. I don't 100% know, but it was definitely a scam, and I have a whole chapter in my book about the fear mongering, and everybody thought that if you caught it, you died. And that is the death rate was not that bad. Like, I understand that people died, and I'm not dismissing their deaths. I understand that it was horrible for those families to lose those folks. I am not minimizing that. However, a death rate of under the death rate of heart disease is worse than that. Every year,
Right.
every single year, even during COVID, there were more people dying of heart disease than COVID. And you never, ever heard anything about that. Like, why? I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure, I mean, I don't know the statistics, but I'm sure automobile accidents I mean, I don't know what the rate there is, but a lot of people die in automobile accidents and they don't, ban cars
Yeah.
for some strange reason.
Hmm.
They just don't. So you have now a business, a a service that where you help caregivers negotiate and learn about and deal with the healthcare system. Walk our listeners through how that typically unfolds. Let's say that you get a phone call from, a daughter, a wife, a mother, a father, someone who has a loved one who's very sick and they're overwhelmed and they're hearing all this jargon and words they don't understand and all these forms they have to fill out and all of this stuff they have to keep up with on top of the emotional and mental stress of, seeing somebody they love, very sick. Kind of how do you start? Where do you begin? What does that process look like?
Yeah. So the very first thing that I do is I have a website. And so you would go on there and you would go to my free consultation. So it's around a 20 to 30-minute conversation. And essentially, I find out what is going on. Who are you taking care of? What is wrong with them so far? What have they been diagnosed with? What are other symptoms that you're seeing that you feel like are being ignored by the system? And kind of get a general idea of what you're dealing with and who you are as a person, as the caregiver. Then I want to find out your top 3 problems. What are they? Getting the person to the appointments, for example, dealing with them being on 27 medications. And that's not an exaggeration. There are many people on that many drugs, with the side effects or with what they even are. Are they on double doses of things? Are they on, trying to navigate medications is a popular one. And then trying to advocate for exactly like what you said, alternate treatments that are not within the typical medical profile for these folks, how to get healthcare practitioners to listen, and if they won't, what to do. So those are like probably the top 3 problems that caregivers come to me with are, I heard about this treatment. How do I get it for my person? Or I do not understand these medications. Or they're saying that now we need to go to a 5th specialist and we can't manage all of these appointments. They can't tolerate them. How do I say no to this without looking like I'm not taking care of them? So we come up with your top 3 problems. Then you have the choice to either do a 1-hour full session with me or a package of 3 1-hour sessions with me. They're extremely affordable. The 1 hour is $97 and the 3 hours is $247. And basically we do it in 1-hour chunks because talking about it for more than 1 hour, people get very overwhelmed. So we do 1-hour chunks. Then I can also support you through email and text message too. I can be there during your doctor's appointments if you are confused or don't understand something. And so those 1-hour chunks, we go through each problem specifically and give you actionable ways to help yourself as the caregiver and to help your loved one. And I teach you how to be firm but professional, because what happens is people get very emotional. And so when they go into these doctor's appointments, they get emotional and angry. And then the healthcare practitioner basically just blows you off because they're like, oh, they're just mean, or they're being rude, or they're being abusive. And trust me, I've been abused thousands of times by family members or the patients themselves, mostly because they're scared. That's almost
They're
always.
scared and stressed and
And
overwhelmed
confused.
and
Yes, all the things.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so to a degree, I understand that. And most of the time I can talk people down off the ledge and be like, hey, what is the real concern here? I am not the specific problem. And the truth is, there may be times where a doctor is the reason why something wrong or something is bad, and then we deal with that. But most of the time, if you overreact or you get angry, you are not going to win. You're not going to win in this system. So I teach you how to remain calm, professional, wise, a critical thinker, and an advocate in stressful situations, that you will, and then you will walk away from those situations with more information. You'll be less overwhelmed. You'll have a better, clearer idea of what to do and where to go and what's important and what's not. And it really helps people settle down when they're caregivers because, like you said, there's so many emotions going on here. For the first and foremost is you don't want to watch someone that you love be sick and be like what looks like taken advantage of or be put through all these ringers, and yet they're still exactly the same as when you started all of this months ago. There hasn't been an improvement. And so a lot of what I do is help caregivers process through all of that while professionally advocating and navigating the healthcare system because I know all the lingo.
Wow. So you'll be actually on the phone with your client while they're in the doctor's office if
I can
that's
be. Yep. Hmm.
yeah. Wow. That's huge. So let's circle back for a minute. You brought up something that kind of rang in my ear where you said when you when you're advocating for let's say that, let's use the remdesivir as an example. Your loved one's in a hospital, they're about to administer this drug, and you believe with every fiber of your being that that is not the right approach. And you make that very clear. But the system is designed around, I'm the doctor, I'm the authority, you should listen to me. And even when you dig your heels in, sometimes they won't budge. So in that scenario, what are a person's options at that?
Right. So within my business, I will not be giving medical advice. But if you were to come to me, let's say, and your wife was being placed on remdesivir and you said, I do not want her on this medication. She doesn't want to be on this medication, whatever the case may be. And your feelings are that our choices are this. You have every right to refuse anything. If they give her or your loved one a medication or a treatment, anything that you have requested that they not give, that is called abuse. And so what we would do is if that were to happen, if they were to go completely against what you want and you saw that she was given or they were given the remdesivir or whatever, we would call the state wherever you're at and we would report the hospital. We would call the state. And then we would report the medical license of the doctor that didn't respect your right to refuse because patient always has a right to refuse. And if the patient can't make their decision, whoever their power of attorney is can make their decision. So if they're making the choice, they legally must abide by that. So if it really gets that bad, we have ways of reporting them. Now, what do we do after that happens? So they've been given this medication. Now we're dealing with legal ramifications, but now you still have your loved one that we're dealing with. Well, we basically navigate the system the best that we can. We do what we can to try to treat them. We can request that they get put to a different facility. You can request a transfer, and as long as they're stable enough to be transferred, they have to respect that right also. So, patients and their loved ones have a lot more rights than they are led to really believe. And, when you're admitted to the hospital, you're given a packet of paper this big or you're emailed a packet of paper this big. And like, who literally is going to read that? Not a lot of people. And in there, it does say you have the right to refuse. Now, the problem is the stigma that comes with that. Because like you said, the doctors are like, well, I know what's best and we need to be giving this person this treatment or this drug. And we just stand firm, calm, and professional, and we state factually, no. It's just like I think it's Jehovah's Witnesses that don't do blood transfusions. And, as a medical professional, you're like, you're severely anemic. You just had this procedure and, you lost a lot of blood. And for them, they do not believe in that. So it doesn't matter what I think or what I think is important or that you may die if you don't get a blood transfusion. That is what you have to respect that. So they may die. So then you take care of them while they're dying. Like that is how this should be. There should be so much fighting. And so that's what I do is I teach and help you, guide you through all of the choices and with knowledge of all the back of the house stuff that very few people have, I can teach you truly what your rights are.
Wow, that's very empowering because People have no idea.
Nope. They think that they don't have rights, as a matter of fact. Most patients and loved ones think that they must do what any doctor or nurse or whatever, especially doctors, tell them to do. They truly believe that they are basically a victim of the system, essentially. Like, they really believe that whatever somebody says is the end all be all. And, people hear about second opinions and stuff like that. I've saved lives asking for a second opinion for people. Saved lives. And you know what? Not all treatments are worth it. And some people have, like, for me, I'm 42 years old. I am a do not resuscitate. I'm a DNR already at 42 because of everything that I've seen. And if I were to get some type of cancer diagnosis or terminal diagnosis that really shortened my lifespan, I mean, I have a 9-year-old and 13-year-old child. I would require so much information on the treatments and protocols of what they were going to try to put me through before I started anything. And, when you're diagnosed with something serious like cancer, they want you to, let's go, we got to do this, we got to get you on the treatments. No, slow down. What are we doing? What are you talking about? Because probably in most cases, I would not do the treatment, or I would do a portion of it or whatever. And it's the reason why I am this crazy about this is because of what I have seen. People get a terminal diagnosis and they could probably live 6 months to 2 to 3 years like they are now, maybe getting a little weaker, not feeling so well. So you get some nausea medicine and you deal with it. And you know what? Your life is ending because you have a terminal diagnosis versus you have a terminal diagnosis. We're getting you on chemo. Then you're going to do radiation. Then you're going to do more radiation. Then you're going to do another round of chemo. And then we're going to keep doing this to you for months and months because we're going to lengthen your life. But if they lengthen your life, it's by a few months, and the treatment itself is horrific. In some cases. In other cases, the treatments are not that bad, and it really, truly does save your life. Like, my godmother had treatment for breast cancer, and she's lived 20 years after it. So, it depends. But that's the thing, is people don't know the questions to ask. They don't know how to interpret the information that they're given. And so they just go along with it because what else are you going to do?
Right. Well, which brings up the point that none of us know what tomorrow will bring. Like in my business, I'm a remodeling contractor. I do aging in place modifications. I have conversations with families about, mom really wants to stay at home. And, but she's struggling with the stairs. She's struggling with the bathtub. She's non-ambulatory. She's, whatever the constraints are, whatever her current condition today is. And we go in and we say, okay, well, we can make these modifications. We can tear out the tub and put in a curbless shower. We put in a ramp. We can put in a lift. We can do, we can go all out and make the entire home, voice activated for the most part. And
Amazing.
we can do that.
Yeah.
And then the question becomes, okay, the cost benefit analysis. What is the cost of doing that extensive renovation worth in light of how we can improve their quality of life? And sometimes they make a renovation and it makes all the difference in the world, and they make the rest of their life for the family and for the patient, the client, 100% better. Their
Yeah.
comfort increases, their safety increases. It's a slam dunk. Other times you do extensive modifications and as soon as you get done, they die.
Yep.
Right. And that's part of how life works. We don't know, but I think educating people on what their choices are, what the options are. Here's all the options in front of you for treatment or for home modification or for any aspect of caregiving and taking care of someone who's struggling in whatever way. Here's the information we have. Here's the pros and cons of each choice. And then you as a family, as a person, as an individual, whoever your support network is, you make the best choice you can with the information you have,
Yep.
right? And I mean that's the reality. And I think to try to convince somebody that this choice or that choice is guaranteed or will produce X result. You can't. You
Mm-mm.
can't. We do our best. You know, you have a heart to help people. You do your absolute best to guide them and direct them and help them in the best way you can. And sometimes the results are phenomenal and sometimes they're not. I mean, that is the burden and the responsibility of taking care of people on any level,
Yep.
right? And that's why I think you have to have a calling. You started out saying that you all your life you wanted to be a healer. You had that in your spirit that that's what you wanted to do with your life. And I think that it's almost like being in a form of ministry. It's that you almost have to have that calling to be any good at it
Yeah.
because you're going to have heartbreak. You're going to have, like you talked about being in the hospital, you're going to watch people die and it's heartbreaking. But yet you can balance that with the people that, you've made an a dramatic difference in their life and you've changed their life. And I'm sure you have cases like that where you can look back and say, man, that one was, that one was sweet. Right.
For sure. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think we as healthcare practitioners need to be more respectful of is that everyone has different ideas of what life or death or both of those things should look like. You have people like me who are like, listen, I don't want to suffer. I would rather allow nature to take its course and pass away than suffer for years. That's my view. There are people who don't care how much suffering it is. More days on earth are more important than anything else. And that is fine. Like, we need to be accepting of both extremes here. And what
Right.
medicine does is they kind of force the do everything at all costs, no matter what, 100% of the time thing on people. And so what that does is it creates a cognitive dissonance because in their mind, they're like, I don't want to suffer. I don't want to always be it. I mean, I have patients who have doctor's appointments 4 out of 7 days a week. Like, hello, almost every single week. You're living at the doctor's office, essentially. That is crazy. Some people may not want to do that, guys. And so, forcing or acting like the only right thing to do is to do what they think you should do, whether it's treatments, appointments, meds, whatever it is, that is not ethically correct in my mind. And
Right.
we need to give people the choice to be informed of what life will really look like with these treatments and such. And be okay if someone says, I don't want that for my life. And also be okay if someone is like, I never want to stop fighting until I take my last breath. Even if that doesn't make sense to us, even if we're like, but your body is riddled with cancer, what do you mean? You have 7 different types of cancer at this point. You're going to die soon. Just relax and focus on comfort. If they say, no, I'm going to fight until my last breath, okay, let's fight until your last breath then. It should be a level of
Right.
respect, Every person is different.
100%. Right. Well, and I think that's one of the things that I see too in my, when I wrote my book, Age Out Loud, is that there's this cultural narrative that says at a certain age, you're not worth treating any,
Yep, definitely.
right? And the same thing or the equivalent would be at a certain level of illness, whatever that is, you're not worth treating anymore. But to echo what you just said, that should be the choice of the person and their family, right? It shouldn't be the choice of the insurance company and the pharmaceutical company.
No, you should be. One thing that I am very vocal about is fully informed consent. So when you go in for a procedure, like let's say you get a back surgery or something, they will say, here's your informed consent. If you don't get this, you'll probably never walk again. If you do get this, you have a chance of walking again. Well, literally, which one are you going to choose? You're always going to choose the procedure because you feel like you don't have a choice. You don't want to never walk again. But like, really, what are the percents of this? You know, what are the chances of if I don't get this very high risk surgery, what does my life look like? Versus what if I do get this high risk surgery and something bad happens? Is my life going to be worse than if I just hadn't have had it in the first place? And that is informed consent, and that does not happen very often.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
No.
So I have a really interesting story. So I had an 82-year-old male. He has since passed, so I can tell this story. And he had necrosis of his scrotum, as awful as that sounds. So the surgeon basically said, listen, we have to take this out or you're going to die. And those, that's what he was told. We have to remove this infection or you're going to die. Now, keep in mind, he's 82. He deserves to live, of course. But those were his two options. That's what his wife said, the surgeon said. We either take this out or you die. So, of course, they get it taken out. The treatment for treating the wound that they created, which was enormous in the most sensitive part of his body, was so horrifically painful and bad that after 2 dressing changes, he refused everything and went home on hospice. And was like, I just need to be medicated. And he wouldn't let anybody touch the wound again. And he died several days later.
Gosh.
So, like, if you're basically going to die either way, or if the treatment is going to be so horrifically painful, like they should have been. And he literally, I was doing the dressing change on him that he decided to no longer do this anymore. And he was sobbing and he looked at me and he was like, if anybody had ever told me that this is what this would have been like, I would have never had this done. And that is my problem. We should have, they should have, those 2 options, have this or you die. That's not good enough. There needs to be more explanation because that man suffered in his last dying days. And you know what? Dying of sepsis, which is what he would have probably died from, which is a blood infection because of that infection, would have been more peaceful. It would have been. And so, I think that that's a real big problem within our healthcare system. How do I fix that? I don't know. I don't know that I personally can fix that, but what I can do is educate caregivers and let them know, like, hey, the treatment for this is going to probably look like this. And then, help with the informed consent situation. Take a little more time with people. So it can, I think that what you do is really honorable, helping people age in their homes. I watched someone spend like $300,000 on renovating their home because they got ALS and 4 months later they died. So I have seen that, and that, that all comes into the informed consent that I'm talking about. The informed consent is all levels, like from the severe story that I just told to, do I put in $1,000 handicapped ramp for grandma when, you know what, she ends up in a facility in 2 weeks after we have that put in.
Right.
Part of that you'll never know. Like there's sometimes
you don't know. You can't predict the future. But I'm going to key in on what you said. Can I change the system? Now, you probably can't change the system, but it reminds me of a story I heard about a little boy walking along the beach, and there were thousands of starfish that had gotten stranded on the beach, and they were out of the water and they were dying. And he was walking along, picking them up, throwing them back in the ocean. And somebody came along and asked him, what are you doing? You can't possibly save all those starfish. It doesn't make a difference. You're just doing a couple out of thousands. And he thought about it for a minute, and he picked one up and he threw it back in the ocean. And he said it made a difference to that one.
Beautiful.
And I think that's where we have to be. We can't change the whole world, but we can make a difference to one. We can help one person, through a difficult time. And, that's what makes it all worthwhile, I think.
Yeah, that's my goal. with Broken and Brave Health. That's my goal. And, I hope that I think that the service is so needed. And I think people don't even know that they need it. Honestly, they don't even know.
Right.
And so I hope to change as many lives as I can and make it, easily available. And I mean, I know I really do. I hope that it takes off because I think that it should. I really do. I really do. And I want to help one starfish at a time. One patient, one
Okay.
caregiver, one person at a time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us. So, for our listeners, if someone has been listening to what you do and they're in a situation that would benefit from having a conversation with you, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, my website is brokenandbrave.org. So all spelled out, brokenandbrave.org. And you can navigate through there and sign up for the free consultation easily through that little shop portal I have on there. And then if you're interested, my book is on Amazon. It's Broken and Brave The Fight to Heal American Healthcare. So that's an interesting read in my opinion, of course. But my website is the number one thing. That's where you'll be able to get in touch with me the easiest.
Okay. So, if people just go on and search for Broken and Brave, they'll
Probably, yeah, Broken and Brave Health. The health name
okay.
is
Broken and
important.
Brave Health.
Yeah, because
Gotcha.
there's Broken and Brave are kind of popular terms, but Broken and Brave and
Yeah.
my name Tiffany Smith in there also may help guide you. But yeah, you should be able to find me.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us, and really look forward to seeing your work take off. It's so important.
thank you so
So,
much.
for all of our listeners, thank you again for being here with us on Aging in Place is a Team Sport. If you know people who would benefit from Tiffany's services, please pass this along and please come back for more episodes of Aging in Place is a Team Sport. Thank you for listening.